parts to an atom. We have the proton. The proton is positively charged. We have the neutron, which has no charge or is neutral. And then we have the electron. The electron is negatively charged. We often write an electron as in little e negative. So anytime that you see that, that's going to stand for an electron. This picture here is what we believe an atom will generally look like. In the center, we have the nucleus. The nucleus is made of protons and neutrons. And then floating in a cloud around the nucleus is going to be, in these orbitals, is going to be our electrons. So the electrons are floating in and around where the blue is in the picture. Those be our electrons. So protons and neutrons in the nucleus, and the electrons float in a cloud around that. This is the periodic table of elements. We can learn a lot of things about the elements just by looking at the periodic table. First, the letter is the symbol name. C would be carbon. The number above is the atomic number. The atomic number is equal to the number of protons in the atom. The number down below is the atomic mass. So this is the mass of all the parts and pieces of that atom. In a stable atom, the number of protons will equal the number of neutrons, which will equal the number of electrons. There are many times where those numbers are not going to be equal, but that atomic number is always going to be equal to the number of protons. When forming bonds between atoms, there are specific electrons that form those bonds. They're called valence electrons. We can tell the number of valence electrons in an atom by looking at the number above the column. Here we have the number 13. Then we have 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. If we take a look at the second number, the 3, the 4, the 5, that gives us the number of valence electrons within that atom. Boron has 3 valence electrons. Carbon has 4. Every molecule wants to have 8 electrons in their outer shell. If carbon has 4 valence electrons, by itself, it has only 4 electrons in its outer shell. It would like to have 4 more to fill those in, making the perfect 8. It fills those in by bonding with other atoms, be it another carbon or maybe an oxygen or hydrogen. Boron, with 3 valence electrons, has 5 open spots, so it's going to look to make 5 other bonds with other molecules. Carbon will like to make 4 bonds. It has 4 valence electrons and has those 4 open spots. If you look over at helium, helium has 8 valence electrons. Its outer shell is completely full. It generally will not form bonds with any other molecule. Fluorine has 7 valence electrons. Thus, having 1 open spot, it's going to look for an electron from one other molecule bonding with one other molecule. Everything in the 14 group, carbon, silicon, germanium, all have 4 valence electrons. Nitrogen, phosphorus, arsenic all have 5 valence electrons. The 6 most common elements important for life are known as sponge. S is sulfur. P is phosphorus. O is oxygen. N is nitrogen. C is carbon. And in order to be an organic, we need to have carbon in that molecule. So all organic compounds have carbon. Not all carbon molecules are organic. Carbon dioxide, graphite, all made out of carbon, or all have carbon within them, and neither of those are organic. This is a different organic than what you might be used to at the grocery store. The grocery store organic is not the same as the chemistry organic. Organic would mean that it contains carbon. If you're studying organic chemistry, you're going to be studying the chemistry of carbon, which is what we are doing now. And then the last one, H, is hydrogen. So sulfur, phosphorus, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen are the 6 essential elements of life. Isotopes are atoms with a different number of neutrons. One of the most commonly used in biology is carbon. Carbon normally would be carbon 12. Carbon 12 would mean that it has 6 protons and 6 neutrons. Carbon 13 is going to have 6 protons, because remember our atomic number of carbon is 6, always giving 6 protons. Being 13, 13 is going to tell us how many neutrons and protons there are. So since there are 6 protons, that's going to give us 7 neutrons. And then carbon 14, our radioactive carbon, is used to carbon date fossils. We can look at the amount of carbon 14 within a fossil. We know how long a radioactive isotope takes to break down. Radioactive isotopes are unstable and will break down over time, and they break down at a steady rate. And we can look at that rate and see how far gone it is, and that will tell us how old something is. Carbon 14, again, is going to have 6 protons because its atomic number is 6. To get to 14, we would need 8 neutrons. A chemical compound is a combination of 2 or more elements. Here we have 2 different chemical compounds. We have simply water, and water is H2O. We have 2 H's and 1 O, or oxygen. And here is a carbon compound. Whenever you see a stick structure like this, it's shorthand for carbon. Because organic compounds have so much carbon, as chemists, we don't like to write carbon down all the time. So each of these points has a carbon. Bonding between elements is quite important. It gives the shape of the compound being formed, and shape and function are very important. They go together. Shape is going to determine its function. And remember, valence electrons are the electrons forming bonds, and we can determine that by the number over the top of the column. There are 2 main types of bonds that we're going to look at. We have covalent bonds that are they're strong bonds, and they share electrons. They have covalency. So if you're a co-captain, you're sharing your captain duties. If you're covalent, the valent electrons are sharing its duties. So it's sharing the electrons. Carbon really likes to form covalent bonds. And then we have ionic bonds. Ionic bonds steal or transfer electrons. Generally, what happens is there's one molecule much larger than the other, and it's going to pull the electron from one molecule into itself, kind of taking it into its shells and be more negative than the molecule it's taking it from. One other bond that we need to know about is the van der Waals forces. Van der Waals forces are close relationships between molecules, and they form slight bonds. On the pads of the gecko foot, the molecules within that foot have a close attraction to the molecules on the wall and form very weak and reformable bonds that can be easily formed and broken as it walks up the wall. So if you remember, van der Waals helps you walk up walls. It's a nice little trick to remember that.